Hari, thank you so much for
Come
joining.
on, come on, come on. Don't be so formal.
No. Because it is actually, the topic is talking about tough times, and this is such a tough time for everyone, and
Yeah,
more so for entrepreneurs, more so for
yeah.
startups. And I've been, today morning I was just speaking to Sameer from PhonePe, and we were having this conversation and saying that there's so many companies who are really next to shutting down, right? And they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and we need more than ever someone who can speak straight, someone
Yeah.
who knows the subject, and someone
Yeah.
who has worked with so many entrepreneurs to help them scale and navigate through tough times. And I couldn't think of anyone better than you, because I
Thank
have
you.
huge respect and admiration for what you say, and more so because you say it, and you just don't bluff around it, and you just say as it has to be said. And your advice has helped so many, including me. So thank you so much for coming and sharing and talking with all of us. We'll start with you giving us some pointers which we should, as entrepreneurs and startups, look at, consider, which is must. And after that, we will take questions from everyone who is joined for this webinar. I hope that works.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, first of all, thank you, Shradha, and thank you for YourStory for doing this. And thank you for all the participants for tuning in. So what I'll do is this is one of the three black swan events of the century. The first one was the 9/11. The next was the credit crisis of 2007, 2009. And the third one is this COVID-19 outbreak. In some ways, the first and the third were real black swans, completely unpredictable. And the second one, which was the credit crisis, I think some people were able to see this through. And there were people who were warning of a bubble building up and the fact that it would crash anytime. So Raghuram Rajan was one of them. So I lived through the first two black swan events. And while this is completely new, this is a medical black swan. The first two were really, in some ways, the financial black swan. The first one, which is the 9/11 thing, was in some ways a termination of the entire dot-com bust, which also happened just before 9/11 happened. So 9/11 was pretty much quickly following the demise of the dot-com era. So I'll just talk you through some of my own personal experiences in the 2007-2009 era. I think there are a lot of parallels from there that we can draw here. At that point of time, I used to be the global head of HR for a company called Virtues Up. This was a US-based company with delivery centers in India, Sri Lanka, and other parts of Asia. This was an IT services come product company. And 2007 was when we were planning to take this, scale up public. So we were just, pre-IPO. And we had done all the preparations, done the roadshows in New York, met the institutional investors. Very, very exciting. I was one of the 5 named executive officers of this public company, which was a dream come true for me. But very soon after going public, in a few months, I realized that running a public company is just not my cup of tea. Two things, were things I found really boring. One is you need to be very, very compliant. And the second is that you need to be very predictable. Predictable really means that if you give out a guidance in terms of revenues, in terms of profitability, you need to stick to those guidelines. You cannot beat your guidance, nor can you fall short. If you beat your guidance, then analysts begin to think that you don't know what you're doing. And if you fall short, obviously your stocks get beaten. So I think you have to run it very, very predictably. And there were some quarters when we beat our guidance in a big way. And all we had to do was just give away the extra money and spend it on things that we would never have otherwise spent, just to ensure that we didn't deviate too much from the guidance. So I realized that that was not a great place for me. But then even before I could figure out anything, Lehman Brothers fell. And in a very ironic moment, JP Morgan was the lead book runner for us in the IPO, and Bear Stearns was the lead manager. Bear Stearns fell next. It was the coolest investment bank at that point of time. And Bear Stearns just collapsed. And JP Morgan acquired Bear Stearns in a fire sale. The price at which it was acquired was a small fraction of the price, before the fall happened, before the crash happened. And as a company, we were just seeing the whole thing unfold rapidly. So clients began canceling in a very large way. And therefore, revenues began to come off, but the costs remained where they were. So we had to take some really very hard steps, some hard decisions. I'll just come to that in a moment. But I think it's important for everyone to also know that today's financial, entire edifice of the financial system is very, very fragile. It is in a complete disequilibrium state. Like if you just imagine a cone, which is standing on its base, if you just push it a little bit, it comes back. So that is stable equilibrium. But imagine the same cone which is resting on its tip. If you just blow it a little bit, it falls off. So that is, unstable equilibrium. So the whole financial edifice across the world today is so interconnected, interrelated that it is unstable. And therefore, all that it needs is a trigger to just push it and break it. So there are two really intangible things that keep this financial, edifice in place. And both are just amazing. One is trust, the other is optimism. If either of the two go away for some reason, either if trust disappears or if, there is the loss of optimism, then the whole thing gets triggered, collapse gets triggered. And so I would say that, the coronavirus, what it has done is really shaken the faith in the whole thing in terms of by introducing something called uncertainty. So in this world, today there are two sets of people, two sets of companies. One is those that have more money than they need, and the second are those that are borrowing money for various purposes. They could be borrowing it for consumption, they could be borrowing it for investing, they could be borrowing it for anything. And the entire process of lending money from the first group to the second group is based on trust. If that trust disappears, then all the lenders will come back to those who have their lent and begin to ask back the money. So asset sales begin to happen. Those who have borrowed begin to sell their assets. And those assets can be, stock market related assets. They can be debt. They can be anything. So the prices begin to crash. And at this point of time, the only asset that everybody believes is the US dollar. So money starts flying away from all the emerging countries and gets converted into the US dollar. And therefore, you're seeing the stock market in India collapsed. It collapsed by almost 35 to 40%. It collapsed in just 30 days. In 2008, the stock market took 5 months to collapse by about 35 to 40%. So if you can just compare the way the financial world has reacted, I think it's far more adverse than it was in 2007, 2008. So coming back to the specific, case of Virtusa and what steps we took. So costs costs were where they were and the revenues began to come up. I'll just give you an example, right? Assume that you are a startup and your revenue is 90 rupees a month and your costs are 100 rupees a month. So you're essentially burning 10 rupees. Assume you have 120 rupees in the bank. You have a 12-month runway. Now just imagine what would happen if your revenues come off by 50%. So your 90 rupees revenue comes off to 45 rupees. So your burn has gone up from 10 rupees to 55 rupees, which is almost 6 times. So what has happened to your runway? From 12 months, it's come down to just 2 months. So can you even survive? So I think each company's situation, each startup situation is unique. There are some companies with much longer runways whose business has not been impacted by this as much and who continue to be robust. Their revenues are not coming off. Their story would be different. But assuming that you are a startup where your revenues are coming off and your runway is shrinking from 12 months to 2 months, you just can't sit and watch, right? Now just assume that you take one simple step, which is you cut your costs by 40%. Now your costs have come down from 100 to 60 and your revenue is 55. So your burn is 15 rupees. So with the cash balance of 120, you've taken your runway to 8 months. So from 2 months, you've been able to stretch it to 8 months. And therefore, you need to seriously begin to think about cutting costs, looking at your runway. And costs typically are people costs, and a lot of costs are also marketing costs. And marketing is a euphemism for discounts. In today's startup world, discounts constitute marketing. So you need to think about these two elements of cost, very thoughtfully, very carefully. And I can tell you for sure that investors, whether they are current investors or new investors, they respect startups that can act decisively, take some bold decisions, behave in an impersonal manner, are not too emotional, and act in a very swift manner. these are the kind of managements and these are the kind of companies that are respected and therefore will get further funding. So I think that's a very important point. And I'll just give you an analogy from the corona situation in Italy. So in Italy, the approach they've taken was that there are limited ventilators. There are more number of patients who need ventilators than there are ventilators. So they said, you know what, we'll do a first come, first serve policy, which is whoever comes in first will get the ventilator. But then very soon you also begin to realize that this might be a very simple approach, but it's not necessarily the most equitable or the best approach. So for example, if you have a 30-year-old woman with two young children and an 85-year-old man, with a bad medical history and limited chance of survival, who just happens to come in a day before the woman, would you give the ventilator to that man who is 85 years, or would you give it to the woman with the two children? I think these are very hard choices, and countries are making these hard choices. They need to make these hard choices. And it's no different with companies as well. Companies will have to make these hard choices. It's tough, but you need to take these calls. So what we did was that, and what every company over a period of time, I think quickly, instinctively realizes that there are 4 categories of employees based on, what they're currently paid and their contributions, especially immediate contribution. So those that are highly paid with questionable contributions at this point of time are the ones that are likely to be targeted. And this brings me back to my point, which is that when you're negotiating salaries as an employee, you should be wary about the fact that if you're overpaid, you're also running a risk. It's fun to get overpaid, especially if your contributions are not great. And if you come with a history of high salaries, but it also is like a millstone around your neck in some ways, because people are watching you much more closely, and at the slightest crisis, you would be the target. So it's important to identify this category of people, but be very careful as founders. Don't discuss this in a larger leadership group, because some of the leaders would also fall into this bucket, and they may be, part of this category. So you need to just discuss it between yourselves and maybe 1 or 2 very trusted individuals who you're sure will stay with you or adding value. Get these names out and act very decisively. And I think, the question that somebody was also asking me was that, how do you do these layoffs on Zoom? My, response has always been that if you can do it well in person, you can do it well on Zoom. If you can manage your costs well without a tool, with a tool also you can manage your costs well. So I'm saying that, you should have the inherent ability to communicate these difficult decisions, look in the eye, be very honest, be very transparent. Don't, get into arguments. Don't get into justifications. Be very clinical and state your point of view. Don't, shoot from the shoulders of the company or your manager saying, I didn't want to do this, but, the company did this, or the company is wanting me to do this. Never, ever say that. So I think you should leave it to the managers to be able to do the right things. But having said that, I would also add that in startups, many of the managers are first-time managers. They're very young individuals. And frankly, some of this ability, which I talked about, comes with experience and comes with some gray hair. So I would say that don't always delegate this to managers, especially if they're young, even if you coach them. I would say that the managers are very young and you suspect that they don't have the skills to do this, then take it upon yourself or get the manager's manager to do this. So I think that's very critical as well. I'll also just quickly touch upon, before opening it up for questions, on, there are some questions about government policy. So the government has come up with some guidelines in terms of, not to do layoffs. So I think it's important to understand the spirit behind any government guidelines. Governments have always come up with guidelines about contract labor, and the intention or the spirit behind such a thing is that you should not be very harsh or unreasonably harsh on those who are less privileged, those who are just struggling to make ends meet, those who are working on contracts, those who are working on the absolute minimum wages, those who are security guards in your premises, those who are serving tea in your premises. Don't just throw them off. The maids who are working at your place, don't stop paying them salaries just because they can't turn up. Be generous to them. That is the spirit. It does not mean that you will not lay off somebody if your business itself is at the risk of shutting down. Government is not keen to protect somebody who's earning 40 lakhs a month or 20 lakhs a month for that matter. The government is interested or keen to protect people at the lower end of the pyramid. So see it in that spirit and go about executing stuff in that spirit. I would also just say that, at these points of time, look at separation packages a little generously. So, for example, if your contract says 1 month's notice period, which is it's an employment at will, you can separate, or the employee can separate, and notice period is 1 month, or you can pay 1 month's wages and ask the person to go immediately. Go beyond that, because you know what? All these are one-time costs. You are taking away these one-time costs so that you could be lean and mean going forward as a structure. So if you cut costs now, you'll just be cutting out the fat. If you wait, if you don't cut costs now, dilly-dally, you will end up cutting muscle along with the fat at a later point of time. And investors also won't respect you because they will realize that you're not being decisive. You've not thought decisively. So I think that's also very key. And just remember that, there are a lot of people who can punch above their weight class. There are individuals who you thought could do a job well. They are 70% ready. Take the chances on them. And trust me, a large number of them will begin to deliver. This is the time if you place trust on those who can deliver, 70% ready, 80% ready, take the risk, tell them that we trust you to do it. They will, step up to the plate and they will do it well. So I think give the chances to those who can punch above the weight class. Give the chances to, those who have fire in the belly to do things, and see the positive side of this, which is try and develop good habits. So for example, companies which ran well always, hired thoughtfully, managed people thoughtfully, separated people who had serious attitude or performance problems at the right time and didn't wait for long, did not hire expensive people without a real reason. I think these are the startups which will find the whole thing easy because they've already built good habits. So I think companies which struggled with good habits went overboard, were overfunded, and therefore developed bad habits, hired people very casually, irrespective of the kind of contributions they were making, the kind of salaries that they were hired at. I think these companies will go through some trouble, but nevertheless, I think it's a great opportunity for learning. Nothing better than, an adversity to teach you lessons. Take up these things, get some stuff done. And I would say that going forward, pick up these good habits. If, for example, your product market fit is bad because it was disguised by heavy capital, it's time to reason out and trying to figure out whether your customers are really happy. Is the product fit market fit really as good as you thought it was? Get feedback from customers. This is also the time when, you should get your whole team together. I think one of the biggest, contradiction or dilemma that people are going to face, that leaders and founders are going to face, is that how do you do layoffs on the one hand, and how do you get people, to trust and work together at the same time? I think that's an, very important one that you should be able to handle. And as I said, every company's situation is different. Assume that you're a company with a lot of fat or where revenues are coming off rapidly, you have to cut costs because you're running short of the runway. Then I think you need to take those decisions swiftly. And those who are left after you've exited, those you want to exit, bring them together, do town halls, do one-on-one, assure them that we've taken the right spirit, right decisions, draw them to a bigger purpose. So just imagine, and it's not just BigBasket, right? Several companies who are doing deliveries, who are continuing to run, factories are continuing to run. How do you motivate these people? Many of us, me certainly, I'm sitting at home and doing this webinar in the comfort of my home. And I don't want to go out because I'm afraid. Now the question is, how do those people who are working in your warehouses, working in your factories, going out doing deliveries, how do you motivate them? How do you make them feel that they should be coming to work when you yourself are not going to work? So I think there are many ways in which you can handle this. So it's important that the field leaders on the field should be present once in a while, should be there at the work spaces, teaching them the right kind of habits, telling them that business is here. It will go away perhaps, don't worry, but let's take care of our health. Let's maintain the social distancing. Let's not violate that. Let's, take all the right kind of steps in terms of hygiene. So that some of the leaders, at least the field commanders, should be out there. And it's important, if you're a large startup with multiple operations, you should empower the field. The field commander should be allowed to call the shots. This is not the time for headquarters to decide things and convey it to the field. The field commanders must be empowered. You must not question them. There will be a few things that will be breaking from time to time. Don't get upset with them. Give them warmth. When the whole thing, disappears, goes away, you can do a diagnosis, you can do a post-mortem, but at this point of time, stand by them, give them hope, give them courage. I think that's very important. And for example, if you're an organization where there are no such people, which is highly paid, questionable contribution that you have to pay off, then you don't have to, do that. In which case, you can then get everybody into a room, do this town hall, draw people towards a higher purpose, make them feel that the mission of the company is something that continues to be exciting. So I go back once again to the point that if your mission was never exciting in the past, this is no time to make your mission exciting. Because suddenly your mission can't be exciting. If you have created a culture where people don't feel like giving their best and they treat this as a mercenary relationship, in a crisis, you can't change that. And that's the reason why I keep coming back, which is that you must do the right things, even in peacetime, so that in a wartime situation, you're all, well placed. Everybody is prepared to do all the right kind of things. So I would just now quickly conclude by saying that these are tough times. Tough times always involve tough choices, and not getting perplexed is key. Please don't get perplexed. Any choice that you make will have a certain amount of negative fallout. It will have a certain amount of negative consequences, but don't let that freeze you into inaction. Because choice A will have more negative than choice B, then please pick choice B. Don't get frozen by the fact that choice B also has negative consequences. That can confuse you. The other principle, please keep in mind, is think coolly, think holistically, which is that you might fire a small number of people, 10 people, but then by firing those 10 people, you're keeping the jobs of 100 people alive. You're keeping the hopes of 100 families alive. So that's very important. You should just take a holistic view. Protect the majority, protect the interests of your company, keep the interests of the organization and the majority in mind. And I would say, keep your communication lines active. This is the time to communicate. I've always said, even in peacetime, you need to communicate. Lack of communication creates mistrust. Lack of communication makes one team believe that the other team is bad. You must create very positive communication. You must create the soldiers to love the artists in your company. You must get the soldiers on the field to begin to love those in corporate who are working tirelessly for them. You must get people in corporate to empathize with the soldiers and give them the best. That respect between different components of the company, this is the time to inculcate. And you should do it rapidly. You should do it through groups. You should post, what one group is saying about the other group to the other group. All of you watched this movie, Bawarchi. It was a very old movie. I think young founders may not have watched it, where one single cook, chef comes into a household, which was all fighting and breaking apart. Just by doing a few things, got everyone to love one another, work together. So I think it's important for founders to create that positive energy, get everyone to work together. And I think that's very important. And it's also important to realize that how do we communicate optimism? How do we communicate positivity? And how do we communicate hope? Because in this environment, there's so many things out there, right? So much of misinformation. How do you ensure that you communicate positivity without overduly being positive? I'm not saying that you should make people do the wrong things or compromise on health, but you should give them hope. You should give them, always positivity. That's very critical. I think as leaders, that's what everyone is looking up to you for. And last but not the least, I would say, tough times last. Tough situations will always go away because there are tough people around. So I think situations like these, sometimes I've seen people who I thought were just good leaders suddenly become very great. So I think this is the time which brings out the hidden talents of some of those. So if you were a leader and you find a colleague who is junior to you, who's suddenly becoming great at handling this crisis, give that person the chance, put that person in the front. So I think this is a time where all of us need to bring out the best in us, give each other chances, and work together. One last closing comment I would have is that I think Your Story has been doing an amazing job. There is a Your Story help desk. I've always been such a great fan of Shradha and all the things that she's been doing. I truly believe that 2008 was one of the defining moment in the history of the startup ecosystem, which was the founding of Your Story. I think Your Story has also created something called YS Academy for all the startup community. They've got an amazing course called funding. How do you take care of funding? And there will be components of how do you need to manage during these hard times as well. And I think this course, if I'm not mistaken, when I also was involved in some ways in designing this course. So I remember it was being priced at 5,000, but I think for all the people who are participants on this webinar, this is going to be priced at 1999. So if any of you are interested, I would strongly recommend that you should do this course. It's extremely powerful. So with this, I'll open it out and happy to answer any one-on-one questions.
Thank you so much, Hari. There are lots of questions coming. This was very, very useful. And, something new I learned is good habits in peacetime, not in wartime, and it helps you during wartime. So lots of questions. We'll just quickly go because everyone would like it to be addressed, and mostly it is around salary cut or downsizing.
Yes.
So if, how do you go about it? And is it fair to get few people out, or is it you have to do it across the company? How do you go about doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I said that, right at the beginning that every company's situation is unique. So for example, if you're a company that has, hired recently in large numbers, have hired expensive people in the hope that your business will grow and it's not growing, then you have to cut off these expensive people. That's very critical because if you do an across the board pay hike, that's not fair. People will see through this. So those who are not adding value, you should just get that bucket, low value addition and high cost. If you are in that situation where you have a bunch of these people, it's important to get that category out. Second category of startups done business thoughtfully, sustainably, and don't have many of these people, have already hired people who can punch above the weight class, and yet their runway is running out. They also need to do these pay cuts. In their situation, you can do two things. One is across the board pay cut, but I think the better way would be pay cut by slabs, which is that people at a more senior level can actually demonstrate this commitment to this by taking higher pay cuts than people at the bottom of the pyramid. I saw a startup which had a slightly different, interesting twist as well. They found that those who were at the bottom of the pyramid, they were struggling because of, lockdown, because of an inability to go out, find food, a lot of other things. So they actually increased the salaries of those at the bottom of the pyramid a little bit. And middle management and top management took higher and higher pay cuts. So I think that single approach, got everyone together. The people at the bottom of the pyramid suddenly felt that here's a company where the management cares. So I think you just need to think about your own situation and deal with it appropriately.
I found this very interesting question. How do you cut off salaries for a team which has not yet joined? The timing is incorrect for them as well as us. Do you think trust would be broken because founders hired in anticipation that in the next 12 months they will raise money, but now they have to have a runway for 18 months. So how do you go about communicating this?
Very good question, Shradha. See, these are all, I don't know in what kind of choices these are. These are, I know, there was a famous book, I think it was called Susie's Choices, which is that, each of these choices that you have is bad. But you still have to pick one. You have two children, you have to save one in the concentration camp. Which one do you save? And you're told that you can save only one child. I don't know what's right or wrong. If I were in this position, I would just honestly get back to the candidate that we made an offer and say, this is the situation and we need, these are extraordinary times. And I will tell you this upfront because we are doing similar things within the company. And this is a revised offer. We would really appreciate if you can accept and join.
Hari, this is also very sensitive, and this is very touching question. How do you sense, and this I'm sure is coming from an employee, how do you sense that any organization, within the organization, they are planning of cost cutting by laying off individuals? How can you sense that? Like,
How should an employee sense that?
yeah,
So I would say that when the management team is meeting too often, they see that there are a lot of meeting invites sent out. Some people invited, some people not. I think that indicates that there are some discussions afoot. But I think employees also have a good sense, whether our company is burning a lot of money. If companies are burning a lot of money, and I think employees then tend to sense that this is a company that will lay off. So you can see all around us, right? Some businesses are impacted. So, for example, the entire sharing economy has been hit. My own sense is that the sharing economy will be hit for the next 12 months. People are not going to, suddenly travel by cabs, suddenly go to pubs and restaurants, suddenly attend conferences, suddenly use an Uber or an Ola or a Didi, or suddenly work at a WeWork. So I think the entire industry is being hit. So if you're in one of these companies, for example, Bounce, right? They're
yeah.
struggling for the simple reason that nobody's using their bikes. Revenues are just coming off. So I'm sure employees in these companies are expecting layoffs. So I think employees are smart enough to figure out, are they burning a lot of money, and is our business adversely impacted by this fallout? They're smart.
Hari, this is a very most outstanding question, if I may say so, by Sanjay Swami. Uh, if you were the CEO and communicating to your team, what would your script be today?
So, Shraddha and Sanjay, I think my communication style has always been honest and transparent. And I've always erred on the side of sharing more than sharing less. There is a worry that you should not share more than is absolutely necessary. So I think when it comes to people, I would share more than less, be very transparent about what is happening. And I would say you should do this town hall. This is the way I would do it. You should do this town hall after you've done the job cuts, after you've done the big job cuts at least. Because there's no point in doing this town hall before you execute it on the job cuts. And please execute the job cuts very swiftly. I can give you an example, in Virtusa, we had people who were very good. Some of the, for example, the North America HR head was one of the best HR heads I've ever seen in my life. He continues to be a very good friend. He invited me home for dinner. His wife told me, we spoke. And suddenly when I was leaving, his wife just mentioned to me prophetically, she wanted to visit Ladakh. So she said, if you don't fire Clark, we'll visit Ladakh next year. It was so prophetic because within 6 months we had let this person go. So I would say that make your decisions quickly. There was a CMO we had to let go. So get into a group, agree on who are the individuals, be very impersonal, unemotional, let them go, call them into a room, have a contract ready, have a letter ready, have the severance package ready, defend and communicate that, and don't get into arguments. After you finish this exercise, then do a town hall saying that, you know what, we've done some of these job cuts. So there was a town hall in Boston, which I did immediately after this. They were all a bunch of Americans, full, it was a huge company. And I was not used to addressing Americans. I had always worked for Indian companies in the past. And I was scared, because some of them were very, very, on emails, they would be very aggressive. But I think the approach I used was just be very honest, upfront, what we are trying to do, the struggles, the fact that if you don't do these things, the rest, 90% of the people are going to get impacted. So it's wise to let some 10 people go and protect the 90%. Our stock bounced back immediately after some of these steps were taken, because the markets then realized that you can take these tough calls. So I think these are not easy choices, and that's why you don't have easy. They're not. Leaders need to take these tough choices. It's not easy, and therefore I keep saying, in a crisis, some people suddenly come out and begin to do well.
So, Hari, this question: what should, if these cuts happen immediately, and it might happen immediately, right? In many cases, what should the jobless white-collar worker do when nobody is hiring and one has to feed a family? It's a tough time, and what should such employees do?
So, Shraddha, I'll give you an answer. I don't know whether you like it, anyone will like it. I would say, India is also Bharat. There are millions and hundreds of millions of people who are just marginal workers, who have never had a well-paying job. And today in this crisis, all of them are starving. Sex workers, for example, the community, right? What has happened to their livelihoods? So I think there are a large number of Indians, who've always been marginalized, and I think their lives are in serious danger. So one way is looking at it is that the white collar workers at least have some savings in their accounts. And I would say that they should be out there in the job markets. For example, recently I made a post on LinkedIn. There was a couple of agencies which have reached out to me saying that, you know what, we are hiring. We are hiring specific skill sets. Some people are being laid off, but some skill sets are being recruited. Can you post this, please? So I immediately posted this, which is that this is an agency which is helping hire. So I think influencers, people who are hiring, should be posting and making themselves accessible, available, so that some of these white collar workers can suddenly reach out. And upskilling or changing skills at this stage is too late. You should always be doing that prior to this event.
Okay. Hari, I'm going to ask you, this sounds very salesy, but some people have asked, could you repeat the course name you mentioned in the end, please?
This course was funding. This is a course on funding by YourStory. I think I have gone through the content of this course. As I said, I was also partly involved in designing that a little bit. So I found this extremely helpful. Overall funding, as well as in funding in difficult times. What should you be doing? How should you be looking at your runway? And the great thing about this course is that it is not theoretical. It's not being taught by professors. It is being taught by entrepreneurs from the trenches who've done the fundraise, who've gone through difficulties, who've gone through all the challenges. I think YourStory will be able to share a link with.
Yeah, we'll do that. We are doing that right now. So, there is another question. Do you think this will put a pause to crazy valuations and abrupt fundings? Will investors be more careful when they are putting money? And similar, that will funding see a pause?
Absolutely. So I think life is a set of cycles, right? Optimism follows pessimism, and pessimism quickly follows optimism. So 2009, you had this big, 9/11 bust of the dot-com era. But very quickly, people forgot that, and there was irrational exuberance again. The housing market took off, several things took off, bubble built, bubble burst. And then people learned good habits. They said we should not, fund those who are not creditworthy. It stayed for some time, 2-3 years it lasted, but again the next bubble began building. So I think for 2-3 years you will find investors who would be a little more wary, they would be a little more thoughtful, they would fund sustainable business, they would ask harder questions. All that is bound to happen. But my own sense is that optimism is bound to return for the simple reason that once cash flows start returning, once people begin to sit on piles of cash, they have to be deployed somewhere. So that optimism will return.
Yeah. How stringent are government regulations about labor laws? Will you know that?
See, government laws are stringent. See, India is a very interesting country, right? Unlike the US. So India is a country where the government wants to protect those at the bottom of the pyramid, and therefore there's an entire legislation on contract labor regulation. At the same time, the government has also given a to companies to run businesses the way they want in terms of the way they lay off people, as long as the people are, from the middle to upper end of the pyramid, the government doesn't care. Absolutely, the government doesn't care. So it's only at the bottom of the pyramid, which is contractual labor. I would say be a little thoughtful about doing that. And it's important, not just because the government is saying that. I think it's just humanitarian value. So the government is, I would say, doesn't care if you're laying off people to protect your business, and the kind of people you're laying off are, people who are educated, who work for good companies. I think that's the way I would look at it.
Okay. 1 second. Do you see that there'll be more funding in pharmaceutical, healthcare due to COVID crisis now?
Yeah, I think in a way, I think this is a turning point, defining point. This has not been like any other health crisis in the past. So, you had SARS, bird flu earlier, but that impact was never as much as COVID. So I think my own sense is that it's not right doing this crystal ball gazing, but hunch tells me that there would be more funding in startups which are addressing, creating vaccines, test kits. And my sense is that by building this capability, I think it's not just corona, right? There will be other viruses, other mutations. So I think my sense is that yes, there will be more investments.
Yeah. Uh, and I'm sure if students have joined, they'll all have this concern. So uh, I'm doing an MBA. Will this COVID create impact in my placements?
Ah, I think generally companies will slow down hiring from campuses. They will slow down hiring laterals. So I think the best institutions, top-notch institutions, may continue to get placements, but some that were on the fringes, borders, which were struggling, will struggle a little more. So I think overall, yes, there will be a little more struggle than in the past. Absolutely.
So someone has asked, so if the lockdown ends on 14th April and business operations start from then, then we'll have only half a month to work. According to you, should we give full month salary or only the other half?
So my own thought is that, 15th April is not when it is likely to end. So this slowdown, lockdown, I think in some ways will be extended, if not immediately, or it will never be a full-blown working. In terms of your specific question about full salary, is very clear on this, which is that if people can't turn up for work, if people are working from home, then you need to pay the full salary. Because lockdown does not mean people are not working from home. If you just take my own company, there are two categories of people. People who are working from home and people who are working on the site, in the field. So, if somebody is, infected or suspected of infection, is quarantined for 14 days, for 28 days, of course you need to pay salaries. The government also is very clear on that, and it's the right thing to do anyway.
Yeah. So this is very nice question, simple question. In current situation, salary cuts are crucial, but if we have a product launch deadline approaching, then how should we communicate the salary cuts to the employees, especially in product teams? Because they also have the choice to reject the new offer and can lead to hugely impact on the deadlines. How to go about it?
Yeah, this again boils down to leadership and communication. So let's just assume that this is a new product launch. And if you don't do cuts, this product will bomb or the company will shut. Then what is the alternative? Should you just do the product launch and kill the company? Will this product that was being launched be bought by consumers anymore? Are consumers continuing to have the paying power? Are they even interested in your product anymore? So I think these are some questions that need to be answered. You need a good leader who can bring a team together. And let me tell you, there will be naysayers always. 10% of the people will be naysayers. I call them, cynics, victims and bystanders. There will always be these categories of people, and these are harmful even in peace times. And they damage, the spirit of the rest of the people as well. So I think you need to work hard with them and take some of these calls. But I think the question that you need to ask in the specific case is, what does this product launch do? Will it help preserve the company? Will it help revenues grow? Will customers buy under these circumstances? And isn't it better that we all take a cut, launch the product, and then if the product is successful, can't we all then take a pay hike again? So I think those are some of the discussions I would say.
So another question by Bridgeraj: how has BigBasket been uplifting morale and communicating about awareness across the supply chain till the end user? How have you been doing that?
Yeah, I think everyone is worried about the supply chain of products, but I think supply chain of information and hope is what you need to preserve. There's a lot of misinformation flowing in the first supply chain, a lot of pessimism flowing in the second supply chain. I think you need to create these two supply chains. Then your material supply chains will automatically get taken care of. So I think that's what we've been focusing on. Coming back to the point I keep making, which is that if you create and inculcate the right kind of values before a crisis hits, then it becomes much easier to handle the crisis and motivate people. So I think I've been posting videos on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I think that that's been the happiest thing for me in my life, posting these videos. And none of these videos are corporate videos. They are videos being created by frontline staff. There was a CE, which is a delivery boy, created such a beautiful video, drawing the analogy of delivery boys and the army and the police. The army fighting a war when everybody is sitting home and being safe. They are risking their lives. Doctors and the police personnel risking their lives. He drew that analogy and put a video. That video went viral within the company too. So a lot of education, communication within the company about a bigger purpose. And on top of that, supplement this with genuine care, which is that your leaders on the front line should be present, working with them shoulder to shoulder, supporting them, taking the blame when things go wrong. When customers complain, stop the customer, but don't, scold the employee. Let them make mistakes. So I think you need to encourage them, ensure that there is visible demonstration of hygiene. The vans are, sprayed with the right kind of things, which are people's human safe as well as, food safe. So the vans providing them gloves, masks, and then, we are writing to our customers to encourage and support the delivery boys. In fact, many of the customers have been so helpful, in reaching out to the concerned the government authorities and the police. They have helped us get permissions. And one of the things that somebody said at the saying no to Jugaad launch was that we are trying to build a company which, if it shuts, people will come out to the streets and protest. So I think that was the vision in some ways, and therefore in these difficult times, motivating people with all of this, which is that we are the biggest lifeline in the history of independent India, more than any other government agency. So I think talking about all this, providing evidence that there is safety on the ground, encouraging them, not scolding them for their mistakes, giving them warmth, giving them a lot of embrace, love. I think that is very critical.
From Hemant, is will R&D team be considered as an overhead and be laid off during this time?
So it depends upon the company, I'm assuming. So I don't know. Like, for example, if you look at fat itself, right, human fat, there's several layers of fat. And you start beginning to figure out which is that layer you want to cut off first. So if you have a $150,000 per annum, salesperson, and their customers are not buying, that is the first person you try to lay off. In terms of training, for example, if you're running short of cash, you will keep the process training on, but you may, cut out the, leadership and behavioral training, but because that is a little good to have. Process training is absolutely must have. So I think that's the way companies will begin to look. So I don't know the specifics of R&D. Is it mission critical or is it a good to have?
So Jaspreet has asked a question, how should SMEs tackle this issue? They would be dealing with non-paying debtors, spending inventories, no immediate sales, and creditors asking for the money, plus to pay salaries and rentals.
See, these are all very difficult situations, and SMEs are the worst hit in my mind because they are the folks that nobody seems to care about. And I'm talking about SMEs, I'm not talking about for the VC-funded startups. The big companies, the government woos them, welcomes them, lays out the red carpet. And for the cool startups, the VCs are there, the SoftBank is there to back them. But the SMEs, the poor guy, who's trying to work in tier 2, tier 3 towns in India, struggling with, a bank which is not giving a loan, struggling with a government official who's coming and harassing them on labor laws. So I think they are hit the hardest. So I think the government has also come up with some regulations, and Shradha, I think nice to see you trying to influence the government to do all the right kind of things as well. So I think EMIs, I think loan repayments, I think there's been a moratorium on that. I think it's about 3 months. So at least small things that the government is doing. But in terms of the market side, if customers don't want your products, I really don't know what you can do. And these SMEs, my heart really goes out to them because they are very ordinary people who are the uncool entrepreneurs in tier 2, tier 3 towns of India who don't even speak English, and no one stands up for them. So I don't know.
Hmm. Hari, this is like the most hit industry, travel industry. So Sanket is asking, what's the impact on travel industry and how should we strategize and promote travel post COVID-19?
I really can't answer this question really because this is predicting how people how quickly they will return to traveling, right?
Yeah.
So 9/11 happened. People stayed off. I don't know for how long. It was so irrational. Just because one plane, was hijacked doesn't mean that hundreds of planes will get hijacked. But America stopped traveling, period. So the entire airline industry was it. I think it took years for people to return to flying. People would just drive long distances in their vehicles. So very difficult to predict how quickly people will come back. So this really depends upon how this entire thing unfolds, this pandemic. So I cannot answer this question.
I have a very nice, very topical question. This is not related to uh, the hiring part. What is your take of the virus spreading through fruits and vegetables and about packages carrying these viruses? Has Big Basket any info awareness to share? I can just say yesterday we spoke to the doctors
Yeah,
and
yeah.
to Chandru that the doctor said that there is no evidence right now that this can happen. And any package that comes, you just have to wash your hand. So there's no spread through packages.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah.
say?
Yes, I can. All I can tell you is that we are taking the right measures. So, for example, fruits and vegetables section is the section where we are exercising extraordinary care. We have quality control teams exclusively for the fruits and vegetable sections, and we have strengthened those teams at the moment. And anyone who works in the F&B section goes through extremely high degrees of sanitization, gloves, masks, 6 feet distance. So I don't know, Shraddha. I'm saying that we are doing our best, but it'll be, bluster on my part to just simply say, no, there's no way, it can ever spread through this. So it's not fair for me to say. I think we are doing our best and let the doctors figure out whether it's spreading. My own sense is that it does not through this.
You just have to wash your hand. If you collect fruits and vegetables, wash your
Yes.
hand and wash
Yes.
the
Yeah.
vegetables. So now, so this is very important question from Sahil. I'm in the healthcare sector and there is no concept of work from home since patients visit and
Yeah.
a weight loss clinic visit, and that's when our doctors and dietitians can work. So under this case, should half month salary be given or not for April? Most of the questions are around that only, Hari, that 14th, so do you cut the salary or do you give the whole salary?
You should not cut salaries. You should get the full salary.
But if you don't have money, then?
And you can't. That's not the situation. If you don't have money, what's the choice then? You don't have money, you don't. But if you have the money, don't be cheap. So that's, I think the government is clearly saying that. They're saying don't saying shut your business. They're saying don't behave in a cheap way. Which is that if you have the money, or if you can, if it's a borderline case, also err on the side of paying. That's all they're saying, and I think that's humanitarian. This just needs to be dealt with a humane approach.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Pratyush is asking if COVID-19 test kits are ready for distribution. Should Big Basket deliver it, which has widely reached a delivery fleet?
I really don't know. I don't think there are enough kids at all. That's India's biggest problem.
Yeah. So Pratik is asking, do you think there will be financial stimulus for the services sector, particularly events and my segment, which is people and relationship heavy, where letting go of people will have long-term impact?
I think financial stimulus from the government to stimulate aggregate demand is bound to happen. And interest rates will go down. In the US, I think they're already zero. So the financial stimulus can be in terms of making interest rates zero, which means that you can borrow. So there are two ways in which the government can stimulate the economy, which is that by making interest rates very low and therefore allowing people to borrow easily, which is injecting liquidity into the system. So those who have borrowed money, those who have lent money, they will not face a problem because of liquidity. The second way of stimulating the economy is on the demand side, which is you create jobs, and that can happen, to my mind, only after there are signs of this wearing away. So then you begin to launch infrastructure projects, which is you start building roads, you start building flyovers, you start building irrigation canals in a big way, start employing people, and that will create income, which in turn will result in consumption. So that's what the government will do. Two things.
Faiz has a very interesting question on a lighter note. Do you
Hmm?
think working from home, people are actually working from home?
It's a good question. I think there are frankly two categories of people. The first category are working harder than they would ever work in office,
Yeah.
and which is that they don't even know it's a Saturday or a Sunday. And there are some who may not be working as hard as they would in the office. And I don't necessarily blame them for slacking it off. I think they are yet to learn how to work from home. So I think the category that knows how to work from home and is still slacking will be a very small number.
99.9% startups are not funded. What is the advice to them in this time?
The only advice to them is I'm thinking on my feet, which is that build a product which is sustainable, which is solving an immediate problem, and for which customers will pay, and for which therefore you become self-sufficient fairly quickly. So your cash flows are positive, and don't invest in things that you would otherwise plan to invest in. Hold your costs, hold your hiring, hold your marketing campaigns, and then focus on getting revenue, getting a few paying customers, getting them delighted is what I would look at.
So Bala has a question which many people actually have. With government saying that you cannot lay off staff and have to pay full salaries, what are the legal issues that SME and startup entrepreneurs face who don't have reserves and live on daily cash flow? What kind of problem will they get into if they don't pay salaries fully or if they lay off staff?
And let me honestly tell you, what problem can they get into? This is a bankrupt company, right? Startup. They don't have money to pay. So what can they do? What can anybody do? Just think about it in common sense. Nobody can do anything. They just don't have the money to pay.
Yeah.
If they had money and are not paying, that's when the government is going to come hard. Government also understand they are a bunch of rational people. I mean, I really empathize with them because they are trying to balance so many things. They are balancing the need for businesses to work freely without impediment. At the same time, they need to protect some people. So they're doing this fine balance. I don't think they're bad people. I think they're very, very sensible. If an employee who's paid 10 lakhs and is laid off goes to the government, I don't think the government has time for all this. They have better things to do. But if they see that one company is just casually laying off people and that issue gets taken up, then the government can come down hard.
Yeah. Prashant is asking, which I'm sure many people, employees across the country will have this same question. What will happen to recruitment across startups and other ecosystems? Do you think there will be a freeze in hiring for another 2-3 months just to reduce the operational cost?
I think undoubtedly there would be some kind of recruitment freeze. Having said that, I think suddenly some skills for specific companies may become important. They might lay off a few people on one hand and hire a few other type of people. That's also very much possible. But at a macro level, there would absolutely be a slowdown in hiring. Campus laterals everywhere.
What do you think about, Hari, this is come in different ways, so I'll ask this question. What do you think are some of the opportunities emerging in this dark time? Because, after this, I have a call with Policy Bazaar, and Yashi, the founder, said that he's seeing a huge spike in his business, and people are asking here, do you see online spaces growing, and especially online grocery? Do you see opportunities?
Yeah, I think there will be an impetus for some businesses. So sharing economy, I said, is a big negative. But online, grocery, online deliveries, online businesses, I think there will be a very positive impact. Insurance, I think there will be new and interesting insurance products. We've also taken an insurance for all our people on the front line, which is protection against a loss of pay. So I think these innovative products with insurance will also come up. And those companies that are making inexpensive testing kits, I think innovation is happening on that front. If a kit was costing 5,000 rupees, if a startup can come up with a kit which is equally effective at 1,500 rupees, I think this startup will go places. So I think healthcare industry overall will see a big boost. So certainly, I think there are great opportunities. Every crisis, every single crisis, without doubt, I think creates opportunities.
Yeah. There's so many salary questions in different forms. And,
I think we
deferring
can just put out
salary.
an FAQ, frequently asked
Yeah,
questions on salaries.
yeah, because a lot of uh, yeah. So Kanumuri has a good, interesting question. Any observation by Hari on consumer behavior during these crisis or emergency situations? This can help design different business strategies for different categories.
A very interesting question. Let's just think of what consumer behavior is based on, right? When would you go and buy a new car, an expensive car? You go out and buy a new car when you see that the shares that you hold, your stock options that you hold, have high values, and you think on paper you're a multimillionaire, right? That's when you go out and splurge on consumer goods. Suddenly, if all the value of all those paper assets disappear, you're going to feel that you're a poor person, right? You will cut down all the expenses. You'll think, how best can I start earning? So this is something called wealth effect. Wealth effect really determines how people spend money, and therefore the wealth of most people has been eroded in a very big way. And suddenly people who are normal have begun to see themselves as poor. And poor people are not going to spend. And poor is mentality, not really in terms of anything else. So poor people are not going to spend. So I think all discretionary consumer items, there will undoubtedly be a cut. All discretionary high value, your show off items, there will be a cut.
I'm going to put you on a spot now. Prashant Shetty has asked, what will happen to companies like Bounce, Rapido, and Dunzo?
I just felt, instead of commenting on a single company, broadly, I think the entire sharing industry will have to look inwards and figure out what is the impact of this, because this coronavirus is suddenly telling us sharing is not such a great thing. I think sharing was such a breakthrough, 5 years back. It was considered the ultimate, breakthrough innovation. That suddenly something is come, which is telling us that, there is harm in sharing. So I don't know what will happen to Rapido. So maybe, for example, Rapido or Bounce, the need itself may come down because people are working from home. The requirement for commuting is coming down. The traffic itself will come down a bit. I don't know.
So since repo rate is down, is
Yeah.
it advisable to raise debt fund from Indian banks, institutions now?
Yeah. So repo rate coming down means that's time to borrow. You can borrow. But I have a word of advice, which is that equity versus debt. Debt has a big risk. I don't want to take the name of a company. I'll tell you, it's a public limited company. Its share price has been beaten down. And for the simple reason it's been beaten down is that it was high on debt. Just look at this, right? If you are having 100 rupee debt and the interest rate is 10%, you have to pay an interest of 10% to the bank that you borrowed from. Now, let's say your earnings suddenly drops because your revenue has come off and your earnings are only 2 rupees. Then what happens? You begin to default on the debt. And what does default mean? That your share price will come down and the people who lent you that money will put up your company for sale. So many things can happen. So debt is a very risky thing. Instead, if you have equity, even if your earnings come down, equity is not a problem because you're not committed to paying them anything. So I think if you ever thought of taking debt seriously, if your business structure can absorb debt, then this may be the right time. But debt is a very risky instrument, especially if your earnings are coming off, it's extremely risky. And they won't even give you because debt is not going to be given to you without proper due diligence. You may not even get it.
We'll take 2, 3 questions and then we'll end, because you have spoken enough and I'm feeling very bad. We are making you talk so much. But to everyone, we'll make this available. You know what Hari has spoken, we'll keep put it out, and of course Hari keeps writing some amazing things, and we'll put all these FAQs and he can keep addressing it. So Hari, this question is: most of the Indian households buy from local kirana stores because of credit facility. Is Big Basket working on something to acquire this segment?
Not really. Our honest answer is no.
Oh, okay. Huh. Raising salary for delivery person or people in supply chain is a good call in these times to reduce absenteeism.
Yes. So absolutely. So I think the way it works is the business head in the region is free to take whatever calls are required, including providing special incentives, raising the salaries, and doing whatever it is required to get people to work.
So now I think, there are very specific questions that FLG and retail, what should we be doing? But I think it's in the broader construct of what you have spoken today all along. So last question is good. I think maybe you could just sum it up.
Yeah.
What are the must-have you would advise to founders if you are a board member for touch-based business? He's saying touch-based, but touch-based, non-touch-based. What are the must-haves? If you could sum it up, Hari.
Sum it up, I would say that tough times always involve tough choices. Don't be a deer, in front of the headlights, like a deer blinded by the headlights. Don't get perplexed. Be decisive. Think clearly. Make the choices. Any choice that you make will have a certain negative fallout. Don't freeze. Think very coolly. Think very holistically. Think in the interests of the majority of the people in the company that you work for. Don't worry about the few. Keep the communication lines going with investors, with employees. Be honest and transparent in the way you communicate with everyone. Do town halls. Be fair in the way you deal with people. And I think deal with fear as much as anything else. Provide optimism, spread positivity and hope. That's all I would conclude with, Shradha.
Thank you, Hari. I always say this, but I really, really get very motivated talking to you, and more so, because I respect you for speaking as is. Like people bullshit, you don't. Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
This is
so much.
very valuable. And to everyone who's watching this, this content will be available. We will have regular conversation. Hopefully, if Hari gives us time, then we will talk very regularly. And I'm also taking this opportunity to plug in the course that we have built. Because of Corona, we are not advertising it so much, but we worked very hard and got some experts, Hari included, and a lot of people. So go get this course. And for this, everyone who attended today, this is at a special price of 1,999, because we know we are all running out of money. So we can't be charging too much money, right? So but also we have worked hard and we have spent money to do this. So that's why we are asking you to pay, because it's worth it. And we have partnered with Harvard Business Review. So it's good content. It should hopefully come in handy once we are out of Corona situation and you are looking at raising money. Definitely it should help you. So I'm going to put the link here. I'm not able to put the link, but YourStory, can you put the link for everyone? Yeah. YourStory, if you are hearing, then please put the link. And for everyone who's here, you get this at 1,999, especially only for today. So just go and get it. And we'll continue this conversation. Hari, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, you have seen so much and you have done the hard stuff. You have been in the battlegrounds so many times. You've done it in Boston, you're doing it in Bangalore. What keeps you going and keep smiling and being so proactive? And I know you are so hardworking. How do you do this, and how do you keep that mental strength and calm and not get perplexed?
I think just an enthusiasm for life in general, Shraddha, And I think this is what I like to do as well, which is that, as I said, a crisis brings out the best in me. The adrenaline begins to flow. And I've also realized that, that being calm is helpful. It helps you think very clearly. And I think my strength is also that I am able to think very clearly in any situation and act decisively. So therefore, it doesn't become such a big stress for me. And I see every job as also a duty. So I was a little scared when I was doing this town hall in Boston. But at the end of it, I think I felt good that I did a job. I did a job well. It made me feel good. So I think it makes me feel good, all of this.
Yeah, and we also feel we're very generous of you to take out time and do this. Thank you, because
Not
it's very, very useful conversation. Just going on record to say this, that some of the people have been have been reaching out. Some of them really didn't want to even touch this topic. They said, "Oh, this is like a touchy topic," but this is the topic plaguing all of us.